Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is useful human Arif Hassan. Arif, did you enjoy your first Halloween at the new house, or are you still moving stuff in?
Still moving stuff in. Also, no trick-or-treaters. I don't know if this is because I've moved into a neighborhood with no children, which is fine, or if we just didn't have Halloween decorations outside the house and that was enough of a signal, or I don't know what.
Well, typically, if you have your porch light on or whatever, they will come to that. But
I thought so, but no gremlins.
No gremlins for you. So instead, you ate after 9 o'clock and were just mowing down on. Were they at least were they keto?
Which is actually why I'm in tremendous tooth pain right now.
Well, I thought if I sucked on the milk duds, it would hurt less when I chewed on them, but I was wrong. Life and things took a turn after that. In every boy's life, there's a summer of 19. All right, well, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. We just got done watching Cliff Kingsbury make a terrible coaching decision, so that was fun. We have plenty of stuff to talk about, including previewing the game against the Chiefs, which we'll be doing with a special guest from the Athletic, Kansas City. We also have a fantastic mailbag from the looks of it, including a little tribute to the death of Deadspin. Well, I mean, it's in a coma, basically, so we'll be going over that in just a little bit, but just want to thank you guys so much for listening, for sharing links on social media, for tweeting the show, just being involved in general. Thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate it. We do have a couple of donations to mention real quick. Nick Bruggeman via PayPal says, "Keep doing what you are doing, guys. Love the show." Thank you, Nick. We also had another donation from Mark via PayPal. Again, thank you guys so much for helping out and keeping the lights on for us and keeping the Loch Ness Monster at bay with Tree Fitty. If you are enjoying the show and would like to donate to it, you can do so in one of two different ways. You can go to paypal.me/NorseCode. That's more of a one-time donation. Or you can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate to the show there. That's much more of a subscription-based thing. Once a month, ends up giving money to the show. So if you're interested, go ahead and check us out, patreon.com/NorseCode, and $3.50 or more per month will get you free swag from us. We're going to end this soon because we have more people signing up than we had swag. So we acquired new swag. I actually just got the new swag in today. So if you, and I believe I'm all up to date on the emails. So if you donated via Patreon to us over the past 2.5 months, please check your email and verify the shipping address so I can start sending this stuff out. So, again, patreon.com/NorseCode, $3.50 more per month will get you free swag. You could also do $3.53 per month, and I would be even happier. That provides just the stupidest amount of joy for Arif and I. We look at that and just go, wow, he cares more than those $3.50 people. Because as they pointed out in Office Space,
that's exactly what we think.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they said in Office Space. What do you think of somebody who does just the bare minimum? Darn shame. These things usually help us keep things together as far as if we end up having some emergency thing to purchase for the show. They also end up helping out with things like the live show that'll be happening in Seattle this year on November 29th at Podolsky's. Again, Podolsky's will be doing a live show for the Seattle game in Seattle at Podolsky's. Again, this stuff just keeps the server costs down for us for storage. Ends up helping us out quite a bit here and there with bills, and helps us remain ad free, which we like doing, and we like to keep we'd like to keep doing this going forward. So, again, that is how you can donate to us. We have a lot to talk about before we get into the preview of the Kansas City game. I do want to give a brief update to something we talked about last episode, because shortly after we finished taping on Tuesday night, the news broke about who was the guy in the back seat of the car. that was throwing up during Curse's Dewey. And I said this fellow should have just copped to the gun charge, said it was him. This is clearly you that should be handling the situation, not the driver.
Boy, were you wrong.
I was wrong. I will take full responsibility for, I was wrong.
I say you as if I didn't like vociferously agree with you. Boy, were we wrong, but primarily you.
I have the brand that can take the hit. I was wrong. As it turns out, the fella that was in the backseat throwing up was Mike Hughes. And, yeah, he definitely should not.
Earth was smart to take the gun charge. Let's just say that.
Yeah, he did not take the gun charge. You know what? I'm totally fine with that. One of the two other people in the car probably could have taken it, but definitely not the driver, and definitely not Mike Hughes. Woof. That, God. Well, at least,
Yeah, now with that out of the way.
Yeah, that out of the way. At least the guy who was clearly the drunkest wasn't the one driving.
True.
If there is any sort of silver lining on that one.
This implies, okay, so not to drag this out too much, but this implies there's like a level of like decision making, like, okay, who's the least drunk? That person should drive.
God. And he was still over, so fun. Yeah, let's just leave it at that. Also, before we get into the meat and potatoes of this episode, just a quick note that a friend of the show, Kyle Slaby, who you've heard his mailbag questions more than a few times over the course of this show, is raising money for sick and injured kids. If you'd like more information, you can actually check out his Twitter feed at The Big Herman for more information. So go ahead and check that out if you get a chance. Right now, we are going to go to a preview of the Chiefs game with Seth Keysor of the KC Athletic. Let's go to an interview that Arif did earlier today.
All right, I've got Seth. Actually, I never asked how to pronounce your last name. Is it Keysor?
Keysor, you nailed it with the second one.
Cool. He writes about the Chiefs for The Athletic, but if you haven't already guessed just from the couple of seconds you heard of him, he's from Minnesota, and he's very from Minnesota, except also actually, just like me, he's actually from North Dakota.
Right. Yeah, if people can't hear it, I never realized how extreme to some people my accent is until I do radio stuff like in Kansas City fairly frequently, and people are always, oh, it's time for Minnesota, and I just it's like, that is not what I sound like, and then it's like, no, you just sound really Southern, and then I'm like, oh wait, that's not what's happening there.
Well, how did you end up becoming a Chiefs fan?
Well, I'm a pastor's son, so we moved around quite a bit, and my dad attended seminary in Kansas City. And so while we were down there, it was during the Joe Montana era. And so he's a big Vikings fan. He grew up in Montana and big Vikings fan, but we were there during the Joe Montana era. And, this is before, you could watch every team, every game, right, all that stuff, early 90s. And so he kind of adopted the Chiefs because he liked Montana, liked the team, whatever. And so you know how it goes. You just get looped in by whatever team you cheer for when you're a kid. And watching Joe Montana march them down the field in Mile High on that classic Monday night game, I think in 93 it was. And I was just hooked forever. And my dad didn't really fight me on it because he'd been a Vikings fan his whole life. He was like, it'll be okay. You go ahead and be a fan of a different team. And don't do this to yourself.
At least they've won once.
Yeah. At least he could have let me be a fan of a better team, but that's fine. So right now it's working out.
All right. Yeah. So let's talk about the Chiefs. They're kind of one of the most exciting teams in the NFL. Of course, that excitement has been muted a little bit by Patrick Mahomes' knee injury, which I guess technically we don't know if he's going to play. My guess is he won't, right, but what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's interesting talking to people who are at practice. He's running around even better than he was last week, and my understanding is he wanted to play last week. My understanding is he wanted to play when the x-rays came back negative at halftime against the Broncos. And they're like, dude, your kneecap was on the side. No, we're not going to play you. You are the franchise. We're not. No. And so I know he wants to play. But, here's the reality of the situation for the Chiefs is they're 5-3, which isn't, great. They gave away a couple games they should have won against the Texans and the Colts. But they're far enough behind the Patriots right now that the number one seed is not super realistic. But even if they lose Sunday, they're kind of right in the thick of it for the number 2 seed. And so I think the prevailing wisdom for them is, yes, this has been best case scenario, but you know what? He had a gimpy ankle too. Let's just let him get 100% healthy and not take any risks. So I think unless he feels absolutely 100% perfect and the MRI shows absolutely nothing and there's absolutely no swelling, I don't think he'll play. I think they're going to wait until he's absolutely 100%. I'm guessing it'll probably be the Titans game.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that all makes a ton of sense, especially given there's a little bit more latitude given that the AFC West doesn't exactly have a winning record with any other
right.
team. So that probably helps. But it feels like there's going to be some mythologizing a couple years down the road when people talk kind of about the season, right? Because there's this like, oh, he's this weird genetic anomaly, which I guess he's double jointed is the thing. But that is that like one of the reasons the recovery seems to be going a lot quicker?
It was a few things. Talking to some of the medical people that either, are obliquely involved or kind of, some of the things that Rick Burkholder has said is there's a couple things that happened there. First was Mahomes, who it's kind of a running joke among people who cover the Chiefs that Mahomes always does the right thing. Like he's great at everything. He makes every right decision socially. He's just like, he's perfect, right? In every way.
Well, except for the ketchup on steak.
Yeah, but even then he somehow manages to own it and pull it off. It's ridiculous. And so when he got hurt, he somehow realized that he shouldn't move like at all. So he didn't move a muscle. He had Austin Reiter, the center, underneath him. He said, don't move. It's out. And yeah, he told him, he said, don't move. It's out. He wouldn't let anyone come near him. So he didn't move it at all. And so apparently what happens when your knee gets dislocated to the side like that, a lot of the damage that's done to the ligaments, and this isn't me talking, I'm not a doctor. This is just what I've been told by doctors. The damage that can be done is because the knee is obviously, the kneecap's not supposed to be stretching the ligaments like that. The longer it's out and the more you move it while it's out, the more stretched out the ligaments get and the worse the damage is. Well, so the trainers run on the field. They see immediately what's going on. They pop it right back in, and he did not move the whole time. And that's part of, so it's kind of the joke. Well, of course, Mahomes even dislocated his knee differently than other people. He also, he is built a little different. He's apparently it's kind of like a form of being double jointed where he's just kind of a bendy dude. So because he didn't move, because they popped it back in so quickly, they just said it's like the least amount of damage that could be done by a dislocated knee. So, everyone just breathed like, you have no idea. I was watching that game with my sister, who's a huge Chiefs fan, and her husband, who's a Vikings fan, who's going to be coming down to the game with us. He didn't even say anything while Mahomes sat there on the field, like, because Hope and I were just staring at the screen. And it was just like, normally he's like a guy that would try to make a joke to like bring levity to the situation. And you could tell he's like, no, she'll kill me if I say something right now. And so that's why he seems to be coming back so quickly. And he's a tough guy. He's been playing on a sprained ankle all season. And he wants to play. I'm guessing, again, unless, obviously, if he's 100%, everything feels great, then obviously you play him. But they are going to want a complete all clear, I think, because there's still time here. And it's not like Andy Reid doesn't know how to make an offense run pretty well with a mediocre or average quarterback. Right.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So of all of the quarterbacks Andy Reid has worked with, and there have been a ton, I would argue that Matt Moore is probably near the bottom of the list. And I say that as kind of like a Matt Moore fan, somebody who wanted the Vikings to sign him to compete with Christian Ponder way back after he had a pretty good season entering as a backup, I think, for Chad Henne. You've got your like Kevin Cobbs and your end of career Donovan McNabbs and all that. But it feels like there's probably more challenges working with Matt Moore, who doesn't have like a full season with the offense, right? He signed this season after quitting his job as a scouting intern for the Dolphins.
Well, then he was coaching high school football. Not even the head coach. Very good team.
That's so beautiful. So how has he, because I mean the offense, 24 points against a pretty good Packers defense. How has the offense maybe maintained? Like, obviously it hasn't, kept on track or stayed apace, but how's the offense continued to be at least
what I saw,
threatening?
and you got a game and a half sample size, and the only good thing about this in the whole scheme of things is that the Vikings only have a game and a half to really know, which with Andy Reid means you have no idea what he might do. He does all kinds of crazy things. What they've done, they really want to be a vertical offense this year. The problem is, Eric Fisher got hurt. Right. Mahomes has been gimpy. Tyreek Hill was out for a while. Sammy Watkins was out for a while. They've been healthy for less than one quarter this whole season. But they keep trying to push the ball down the field. They want to be really vertical, and which makes sense with the weapons that they have and with Mahomes. With Moore, they seem to have shortened the field a little bit. They've got a few deep shots put in here and there, but mostly they're looking to stretch the field a little more horizontally. And Reid is just looking to exploit mismatches with different route combinations. So it's a lot of what you would do with Mahomes. It's just abbreviated. You don't have as many options. They clearly are looking to get the ball out pretty quickly. And that's one thing where like a vet like Matt Moore, who's seen a lot of coverages, he's seen a lot of blitzes, he's got like 40 starts under his belt. So he's a guy who can almost, it's like a very, 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 very poor man's Alex Smith, where you rely on that pre-snap read, and then you say, I'm going to get you, hey, Travis Kelce, I'm going to get you the ball quickly, you do something with it. Tyreek Hill, I'm going to give you the ball quickly, you do something with it. And then, run these occasional, like have Travis Kelce leak out onto the field while you fake two different jet sweeps or a potential option to the right. I'd never seen that before. On that Kelce touchdown, that exact setup, I'd never seen it. And so I think it's just they're going to rely on a little bit of read magic and then just count on Moore to make the right decisions.
So Patrick Mahomes, I think 9.7 average depth of target in this season. Matt Moore, 33rd in the league at 6.6 average depth of target.
Yeah.
So that bears out. And then he's also getting rid of the ball a full 1/10 of a second faster than Mahomes. And Mahomes, for all his scrambling, is league average in terms of how long he holds onto the ball in the pocket, despite leading the league in play action percentage, which I think Matt Moore also almost 50% of his dropbacks.
Right. And, it's one of those tough things. I don't know the sites that track that data, whether or not they're differentiating between play action and RPOs. So much of the Chiefs' play action is really an RPO. And, you can tell, like Ted wrote about on the other, if you watch the offensive line, they are run blocking. Yeah. And so there's a bit of a mix there. And I think Moore chooses to hand it off a little more often. And one interesting thing to note, he's getting rid of the ball a 1/10 of a second faster, which you and me both know in football, that matters. That 1/10 of a second is a big deal.
Yeah,
but that is even, in my opinion, I'm guessing, doesn't account for the fact that he takes a tick longer to get rid of the ball when he sees where he's going to go, and his windup is significantly slower than Mahomes. So he's making the decision even faster. It just takes him a bit longer to get the ball out once the decision is made. So I really think they want to just say, more, make your read, get the ball out, and let this plethora of weapons we have do something with it.
Yeah, we'll talk about the offensive line and the skill core in a second. I'm just kind of fascinated by all of this offensively. What are the challenges then? So if it seems like this is kind of the approach with Matt Moore, and if and I looked at Matt Moore's deep ball statistics, by the way, going all the way back to like 2007. So he is the 6th most accurate deep ball thrower, but also throws interceptions at like 3 times the rate of the average NFL quarterback when throwing deep. So if it's landing in someone's hands. Seems to be the strategy. So he's in theory a generally accurate deep ball thrower, but he has never thrown deep all that often in his career.
Right.
Obviously here in this like 6 quarters or so, he wasn't throwing the ball deep. The challenges of consistently throwing the ball short. I mean, you know that having watched Alex Smith, I know that watching Sam Bradford, Christian Ponder, Teddy Bridgewater. There's a lot of strategic challenges throwing the ball short. How can the Chiefs kind of overcome that? Because obviously the Vikings will have their responses to that.
Right.
What are the responses to those responses, do you think?
I think what they're going to have to do is rely on hitting on a couple of the shots over the top to make it to where it's an option on plays, maybe even your second read or something like that. You know what I mean? Just, hey, look, anytime you see them rotate the safeties this way, at least take a shot. And that's why, having Tyreek Hill makes such a big difference now that he's healthy. And you even saw that later on, when Hill really emerged in 2017, how much it altered Alex Smith's ceiling as a deep ball passer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because Hill isn't just fast. I mean, he has unbelievable ball skills. He's an exceptional football player, maybe the most athletic player in the league, pound for pound. He's just a freak. And so I think
beat out, Stephon Diggs in contested catch rate last year too.
Right, which is crazy because neither of them are big guys, and hopefully people are finally figuring out. No, we need this 6'3" guy. No, you don't. You need someone who has ball skills because that matters so much more. So I think the thing that they're going to have to do is take at least a few shots because you have to make them respect it. And that was something the Chiefs really had a hard time doing. And the difference between Moore, I think, and Alex Smith in maybe a positive note, and there's not a lot. I mean, obviously, if they could have Alex Smith in there instead, I think they would be much better off. But, his leg almost fell off last year. So, I mean, it sounds like he's doing
long odds.
Yeah. The odds are not in his favor. So I think the key is take advantage of the fact that Moore is willing to let it rip down the field and trust his receivers. And when you have Hill and Hardman, I think you've got to take those shots. Now, the danger is, Mahomes, when he is inaccurate down the field, it's almost always an overthrow. So he doesn't throw nearly as many picks as people would think, as aggressive as he is. With Moore, you see some more underthrows, so it's going to be more dangerous. And that is, again, the challenge, to make those deep shots often enough that teams have to respect them, but not so often that you get exposed as a guy who maybe, like you said, someone's going to catch it and turnovers will kill him. I mean, if it weren't for that fumble against Green Bay last week, that game might have gone very different. With Mahomes not in there and multiple other guys out, they can't turn the ball over.
Hey, let's talk about those skill players because this is probably the fastest group. I don't even think it's particularly close. The fastest group of receivers in the league. Travis Kelce is not slow.
Right.
Even the running backs. I mean, so LaShawn McCoy aging and Damian Williams is not, the fastest running back in the league, but I would still argue that they've got more movement ability. How about that? Than a lot of running backs that you'll see. Right. So it is a remarkably athletic skill core. Yes. How can Matt and Moore use them to, I think, take advantage of those talents? Because I was looking at the number of screen throws that the Chiefs were throwing. It's basically the same amount as when Mahomes was in, about 20-some%.
Yeah, and Andy is always going to feature a lot of those. I'm wondering if he didn't really uptick it because he figured that's what people are expecting. And I would almost think the same thing against Zimmer. Zimmer's such an excellent defensive coach, and I think the Vikings are a well-coached team. I don't know how effective a bunch of screens are going to be against them because, they're very disciplined. And so I don't know if that's the route he'll go. I think you might just go with those quick throws to the sidelines that kind of look like screens but aren't technically screens. That quick, hey, they're giving Hill a bunch of cushion, take the easy 5 yards, and just in case he breaks a tackle, then he goes for a lot farther. So I think the way they're going to try to take advantage of it is just get the ball out quickly, maybe a few of those little touch pass type things, and get guys moving sideline to sideline. I'm waiting all year for them to just, we're going to just run 5 verts over and over and see if anyone can stop it. Because when you talk about probably the fastest receiver group in the league, I've long said, ever since I kind of really watched him in training camp, if Mecole Hardman weren't on a team with Tyreek Hill, people would be talking about him as one of the fastest players in the league because he's freakishly fast. Just people don't notice it because Tyreek Hill is just as freakish. Unlike probably 70% of the teams in the NFL, Hardman's probably the fastest guy on the team. And they can just run by people. And Kelsey's one of those weird kinds of fast. He always looks like he's slow, but then he's just running by people. It's very strange. So I would love to see them just, let's push it vertically, see what happens. But I think they'll try to take advantage of it more so in getting guys the ball in space. Kind of some of the stuff you saw against the Packers where it's almost like down the field screens where the route combinations are set up to put guys on the right side of the ball. Reed loves those. And they work really well if the timing is there. Otherwise, you get a penalty.
Right, yeah. Look a lot like one of those mid-screens that are legal in college but not in the NFL. But now the receiver is the offensive lineman. Well, let's talk a little bit about that offensive line. So with the departure of the center, I think to the Raiders, Rodney Hudson, right? And like you mentioned, there were some injuries to Eric Fisher. I think he's back, but there was a lot of Cam Irving this year.
Fisher actually, he started to practice again last week, and now they've eased up. He, as of now, as we record this, he hasn't practiced this week, so he's probably going to be out.
Oh, okay. Oh, no. Okay, so that leaves what feels like a fairly strong right side of the line and a fairly suspect left side
and
of the
interior
line.
really. Austin Reiter, the center who's replaced, Mitch Morse got the bag, and good for him. Great guy, very good center. He's been an anchor on the line for years. He got the bag and went to Buffalo, and what do you know, that offensive line has really improved. Reiter did all right last year. He's been inconsistent. The left guard play has improved a little bit as of late, actually with the backup in. Andrew Wiley should be back, the initial starter against the Vikings, but he wasn't playing that well. And Cam Irving, I'll just tell you something for you guys to maybe look for. Irving is going to either be a glaring weakness or he's going to be awesome. And there is just no in between with that guy. It's very stressful to watch at left tackle because he has had some games like against Indianapolis. Justin Houston just humiliated him, and I've heard the Vikings might have some good edge rushers, so it could be really ugly. And that obviously changes what you do as an offense too. So you can't push the ball downfield as much if you can't trust your line.
All right, let's flip sides to the other side of the ball. They finally got rid of Bob Sutton after what felt like years of, literal years of Chiefs fans hoping that they would move on. But the defense doesn't seem that much better. I mean, so a bunch of the individual players I like, right? Like I like Bashad Breeland, who I think is going to be injured and not going to play in this game. I like Tyrann Mathieu. I like Damian Wilson and Anthony Hitchens. On the field, I think Frank Clark is very talented. I liked Tano Pasno as the pick, although I'm not confident that that's panned out. I like Kalen Saunders as a pick. We'll see if that pans out. Chris Jones,
and he's back this week. He's practiced in full a couple days in a row, and that's huge because Jones is a potential. He can take over whole drives, and that's a big deal.
So is that going to maybe revitalize is the wrong word, but kind of recenter that defense, because they've got a really good defensive coordinator, Steve Spagnuolo, who's been pretty successful in a lot of places he's gone.
Sure.
What's the issue with this defense? Can it hold up? I mean, the Vikings are coming off of a month where somehow Kirk Cousins was the NFC Offensive Player of the Month with the second highest passer rating
good for
ever
him.
In a single month of football behind Peyton Manning. I mean, congrats, man. Now you get to play the Chiefs defense. Which seems helpful, but one
of my favorite team stat measurements is DVOA with Football Outsiders. I know you talk about them. They do good work. I don't know about the individual player stuff. I love the team stat stuff though, right? Because it contextualizes everything. The Chiefs pass defense by DVOA is ranked 4th in the league.
Right.
Which, it's really flown under the radar. And I think a lot of people, I'm very curious, this will be a good litmus test for kind of the new strategy that they've been using, because they did pretty well against Lamar Jackson. Like they really, I mean, the Chiefs were winning that game like 31-13 against Baltimore. And then they kind of chilled during the fourth and just coasted to a win. Gardner Minshew played pretty well against him, but now we know Gardner Minshew is like, hashtag actually good. And if you really think about that game against the Packers, Rodgers had to earn a lot of those yards.
Right.
And if you take away some of those freak Aaron Rodgers plays, that game is very different looking. Because, I mean, I'm sure you remember watching. It's like, man, they were hitting the crap out of Rodgers for a lot of the game. And so they've been super aggressive, blitzing. And I like what Spagnuolo's done. He's kind of figured out, okay, my linebackers aren't great in coverage. You know what we're going to do? We're going to send 6. And if you can get the ball out, good for you. And they just dominated Joe Flacco with it because, he's Joe Flacco. And then Rodgers, they did really well for a while. And then Rodgers, being Rodgers, he made some freak throws and upset everyone. So that's an interesting thing. Most people don't realize that the Chiefs' pass offense has generally been quite good this year. But the Vikings game, I think, will be an interesting litmus test for them because they're coming off 2 games where they dominated Denver and then they played all right against Rodgers and the Pack. And so this is, the Vikings land somewhere in between in terms of passing attack, right? I mean, Cousins was probably better last month, honestly, in terms of production. So it'll be interesting to see. It's their run defense that was just awful early in the season. And they've started to shore that up a little bit. They're, I think, 17th overall in DVOA. Run defense is like 30th. So I would just say this, with Jones coming back, like with Clark still out, that helps in terms of for the Vikings. But we'll see how it goes because I don't know what's real and what's not with this defense yet. But the pass defense has been oddly good. Quarterbacks, to make things happen, have had to make good throws. They've had to deal with pressure. And when they performed. But when not, they've actually performed pretty well. My concern is that Dalvin Cook is going to run for about 4,000 yards.
All right. That's a fair concern. So when you talk about the run defense, a lot of it starts, with that defensive line. Like you mentioned, there were some injuries, some players are coming back. What's been the story, do you think, for this defensive line?
The defensive line has mostly been okay. They had a really rough outing against the Colts. They just couldn't do anything up front, but that was also a linebacker issue too. The line is starting to come together a little bit. Derek Nottie was a second-round pick last year, I think it was. He played really well against the run last year. Has been kind of up and down. Lately, he's coming around. Colin Saunders, they picked him this year. He wasn't going to see any playing time until Jones got hurt. Mm-hmm. He actually, after a pretty tough start, has started to come around. So the line overall, they're going to be missing Okafor. They're probably going to be missing Clark. But like Emmanuel Ogbah came in from Cleveland. He's actually done pretty well. Tano Passanio has kind of come on this year. They've got a lot of bodies up front that they rotate in and out, and they're very, very aggressive. The run defense issues were primarily along the interior, and that was problematic. They were really losing in the interior. Saunders in particular was struggling for a while there. And so the biggest issue, though, in terms of run defense, the linebackers just were not playing well. And so I think that's why you've seen Spagnuolo the last few weeks kind of alter things and start stacking the line of scrimmage a little bit more. Kind of almost, I think Zimmer was the first coach to really start sprinkling the A gap constantly, right?
Yeah.
And so some of that where it's just like, no, we're going to have 7 dudes on the line of scrimmage. We're going to back some off into coverage. If you pass, or we're going to blitz the crap out of you. And that actually helps against the run a little bit also in terms of bodies. So the story of the line is that in theory, it should be a strength of the team. Without Chris Jones, it really struggled for a bit. And Clark, now we know, was playing through an injury, which explains why he was kind of back and forth. But with Jones coming back, it should be a strength of the team. Now, should and is often do not marry in real life.
I can't believe you would slander Big Ten linebackers like that. Damian Wilson, Minnesota. Anthony Hitchens, I think he's from Iowa. Backups Darren Lee, Ben Neiman, also from the Big Ten. Cannot believe this.
They've been fine. Like Reggie Ragland, now he's not from Big Ten, but they've done all right. The problem is they're just limited, right? They're not really 3-down linebackers.
Right.
And then the guys they have that can cover, like Dorian O'Daniel, he's not good against the run. So they just don't have that guy who can kind of do it all, sideline to sideline speed, cover running back. And that's a problem. And so Spagnuolo's been trying to figure out who can do what. And one adjustment he's made the last couple of weeks, as the defense has really started to be better than it was early in the year, was giving Ragland more snaps and actually playing him as a Sam backer on the line, like outside the tight end. And he's actually performed really well in that role because it doesn't ask him to do the things that he's bad at, but just takes advantage of his strength.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the coverage unit that seems to have a bigger impact on games, the secondaries. So obviously, they bring in Tyrann Mathieu to kind of boost the pass defense. They trade for Kendall Fuller, phenomenal trade. They pick up Ashad Breeland from waivers. They draft Juan Thornhill. They have Morris Claiborne. That's a name. What's
that is a person who plays cornerback in the NFL.
That's true. Javarius Ward. I think there's a bunch of former Dallas players on here.
Yeah.
Was that 4 or 5? Anyway, what's the story with the secondary?
Sure. So the safety play has been excellent. Juan Thornhill was a steal. I wasn't entirely sold on him initially because I thought in college I wasn't sure about his change of direction, but he's very athletic, explosive, great ball skills, great range, excellent free safety. I think in college it might have been more mental than physical because they had them play he played like every position in the secondary while in college. Now they're like, okay, you're a free safety. Just do your thing. He's done really well. Matthew's been a great signing, leadership and all that aside, but he's so versatile. He kind of fills in the gaps everywhere else, depending on what you need that game. And he's done a good job with it, both in coverage as a blitzer against the run. So their safety play is just exponentially better than it was last year. The cornerback play, they've been okay, but they don't have any like one guy that I'm comfortable covering Diggs or Thielen, right? Like I have guys like Breland has been a competent NFL cornerback for a while, and I think he'll trade some punches. He'll do all right, but ultimately he's going to lose that matchup. Kendall Fuller is a guy that I was just thrilled about when the Chiefs got him, and he has not played at the same level he played in Washington. He's been okay, and that's kind of a theme you've got with the Chiefs corners this year. They've been okay. They haven't been terrible. Charvarius Ward is better than he was last year. He's kind of shored up. He had some real issues with blown coverages in zone, and he's really fixed that over the last 3 or 4 weeks. So he's got some physical talent, and he's played pretty well. So it's kind of like okay across the board, right? Like, oh, this is fine. It's all right. It's kind of like, if someone's like, oh, we've got frozen pizza and it's Red Baron, you're like, oh, okay, I mean, I'll eat it. Hopefully Red Baron's not your favorite. I've never met anyone whose it is.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I haven't either.
Yeah, you'll eat it. It's not bad. You know what I mean? But it's not like Tombstone or DiGiorno. Like, I'd be fired up to eat myself a Tombstone or a DiGiorno. But a Red Baron, it's like, yeah, sure. This is good enough. But against really good teams, I think the coverage is going to get a little more exposed. They're very reliant on Matthew and Thornhill to make plays and to protect the corners. And we'll see how long that's sustainable.
Do you see? So Matthew played a bunch of nickel safety hybrid in Arizona. Obviously at LSU, he did a ton of that. Do you see him playing nickel corner hybrid, especially when like Thielen or Diggs, move into the slot?
I haven't seen a ton of it. They seem to really want to keep their nickel corners playing their nickel corner stuff. Was Kendall Fuller, who's pretty good at it. And now with Fuller hurt, and he may or may not play, he's got a busted thumb. They've had Rashad Fenton playing nickel, he did not look ready in preseason, but he's played 2 pretty competent games in a row, which, I mean, you and me know with cornerback play, you never know when it's just going to change completely. No position is more volatile. It's just crazy. So I don't see them doing a ton of that. They have played him in the slot at times, but they like reserving that for zone blitz looks and stuff like that. So he'll move everywhere, but I wouldn't expect it more than a handful of snaps. You probably will see him lined up there a few times opposite Diggs or Thielen, but whether he's doing it just to be part of a zone or part of a blitz or actual man coverage, it's tough to say. And I think that's part of the appeal of Matthew is he allows Spags to kind of screw with opposing quarterbacks' heads.
All right, fair enough. So we've covered everything but the special teams. They, of course, have one of the best special teams coaches in the NFL should be head coach Dave Tube. Right, Tube? That's right,
you know what? I swear to God, it has been years, and I still don't remember. As God is my witness, I always say it wrong. I know that one. So I think you're right, though.
All right, and then they've got the better Colquitt brother in Dustin. How have you felt about the Chiefs special teams units?
Interestingly enough, they really struggled for probably the first 5-6 weeks. It was very uncharacteristic. A penalty on almost every return. The coverage was still good. Coverage is always good under Tobe. But they struggled with penalties. They weren't getting good returns. You had some missed field goals. You had some fumbles, just some mental lapses. The last couple of weeks, they've been much better and much more what we've come to expect from his group. Chiefs fans, I don't think they realize how spoiled they've been with that. They've had a special teams advantage for years. in every game. And it becomes easy to forget about that because it does give you an edge. It's, when your coverage group always contains them to 5 to 10 yards at most and always gets, 15 to 20 yards. It's like, well, that's not that big. Well, that's like 80 yards over the course of a game. It matters. But lately, lots of penalties, lots of whatever. But they've cleaned it up the last couple of weeks and they've looked better. So we'll see if it continues. But that was one area that was a surprising weakness lately.
Interesting. All right. Well, we'll both be headed down. We'll see each other. We'll eat some Kansas City barbecue and all that. We'll probably argue some more about the game, but we didn't even argue at all. We'll argue about the game, I'm sure. In the meantime, why don't you leave us with a score prediction? We don't hold anyone accountable to them because it is kind of a silly exercise. But we do just kind of want to get it out there to get your feeling on the game. What do you think's going to happen?
I don't think Mahomes is going to play. I really want him to because have you ever seen Mahomes play in person?
In person, no. That would,
yeah, right.
Kind of why I made the trip.
It's special. It's kind of, I'm sure you've seen players like that where they just pop live in a way that they don't on TV. How often he does things that are very close to no look passes, the velocity, the body contortions, the way he fakes out the defense. You have to see it live. So I'm a little disappointed because I think that's the route it's going to go. So I don't think he plays. However, I do think the Chiefs make a good game of it. And I just don't see them dropping 4 in a row at home. That would surprise me. So I'll be a bit of a homer today, in part because Cousins has been really good lately. And I mean this so nicely. I am not a believer. And so I think the other shoe might drop finally, facing the type of pressure that he might face, especially with Jones against that interior O-line. If Dalvin Cook doesn't run for 160 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns, I think the Chiefs take it by a field goal, maybe like 27-24.
All right. Well, it's good to hear. You're not alone in these Kirk Cousins thoughts. I think Vikings fans are still trying to figure out if it's real, and they'll still be trying to figure it out, I think, for another year. So thanks so much for coming on. I kept you 20 minutes longer than you said.
You did.
So hopefully you don't get in too much trouble. Thanks so much.
Yep.
If you've got anything to plug, let them know.
Just if you're interested in some of the stuff we do, you can check out Times Ours. That's our Chiefs podcast on The Athletic. All my stuff is up at The Athletic. Nate Taylor stuff as well. You can look up either one of us on Twitter just with our names. And, it's going to be a fun game. I'm excited.
Let's go to the mailbag. And the first question is from Luke Braun, who asks, would it be better to play stronger coverage underneath and force Matt Moore into low percentage deep attempts, or take away the deep stuff and make them dink and dunk?
Yeah, so in writing up my preview of the Chiefs game for The Athletic, one of the things that kind of stood out was that Matt Moore against the Packers really did not attempt many throws deep. Checking out the All-22, not many routes went deep, so this was clearly by design. His average depth of target was 6.6 yards downfield per throw. For context, that would be 33rd over the course of the 2019 season, only ahead of Jimmy Garoppolo and Teddy Bridgewater. Mahomes ranked 7th in the NFL in average depth of target, 9.7 yards downfield. They didn't have more screen passes. They just didn't throw deep, and they primarily passed with Matt Moore under center. They primarily passed on targets fewer than 10 yards downfield. So very much kind of ahead of the sticks, slants that get you some yards after the catch and stuff like that. So they very clearly wanted to focus on short passing for Moore. So I looked at Moore's deep attempts going all the way back to 2008. And by looked at, I didn't watch every single snap. I'm not that crazy. But I gathered the data that PFF had on passes traveling 20 yards or further downfield for every quarterback. So interestingly, of any quarterback that threw in that span all the way back to 2008, at least 120 attempts deep downfield, Moore ranked 6th in accuracy. And I was like, that's crazy. Why doesn't he throw downfield more? Because in attempt percentage, he's not he's not that high, and he's actually very low in attempt percentage. So he clearly only throws deep when it's very obvious that he should throw deep. And then I was like, well, what is his, interception rate? What is his touchdown rate? Is it just that, he's accurate and receivers are dropping the ball a lot? And that turns out not to be the case. He leads all quarterbacks in interception rate on targets deep downfield. So even though he is the most accurate quarterback, or one of the most accurate quarterbacks throwing deep downfield, accuracy rate of 45.9%, he also is just very much likely to throw an interception. And it is a huge difference. So he's the most interception prone at 1.94%. The next closest is Kerry Collins, which that tells you how old this list is, at 1.19%. So there's a 0.8%. It's an enormous difference. The gap between him and second place is like the gap between, let me take a quick look. Holy crap. Is the gap between him and like Russell Wilson at like 31st place. It's an enormous gap. So he throws tons of interceptions, relatively speaking, throwing deep. Someone is going to catch the ball if he throws it deep. That's probably why that he doesn't throw it deep all that often. Now, I didn't look at all of these. They might be, coming off of drop passes or whatever. He has not had traditionally a very good skill core. He's thrown to like Brian Hartline, and that was one of the best receivers he's thrown to in his career besides aging Steve Smith. So I would argue that as a result of, taking a quick look at this, that if he's not comfortable throwing deep, and again, his attempt percentage is pretty low, relatively speaking, then I would say make him throw deep and intercept those passes. I think that the likelihood of him generating a deep touchdown, or the likelihood of him, just generating a ton of yards, that's going to be there. But I think that, the possibility of generating those turnovers, which again, it doesn't happen a ton, 2%, even though it's the most in the NFL, I would say that's probably worth it because interceptions, obviously are worth so much. Turnovers are worth so much. I think that you can take advantage of it, especially kind of later in his career when the arm strength is kind of failing. So I would shore up short zones and play maybe cover 2 even, which is difficult when you're playing like McCole Hardman and Tyreek Hill, and we talked about how fast those receivers are. It's difficult, but I think that that's probably worth it.
Next question is from Brian Jellerson, who asks, you guys think Thielen will be on a snap count?
No, I don't think so. I think if he's going to be healthy enough to play, he's going to be healthy enough to play, and they're just going to play him outright. I think, and this isn't true for like all players. Like remember when Adrian Peterson was coming back, they were thinking about, whether or not he'd be on a snap count. There was discussions about whether or not Dalvin Cook could be on a snap count. So that's not true all the time. But I think for Thielen, who felt healthy enough to play on the Thursday game, although the Vikings were probably pretty smart, especially considering the outcome. They didn't need him to not play him. The fact that he felt healthy enough then is certainly a good indication that he'll be healthy enough to play the whole game. Plus, he tends to just play through a ton of injuries. He broke a bone in his back, I think against the Jets, and he just played the rest of the year. He didn't miss a game. So I think that he'll find a way to play every snap if he can.
Next question is from Nick Olson, who says, the Vikings seem to have pretty ideal corners for bump and run press man coverage. Rhodes and Waynes, obviously, plus Mack seems stickier and less prone to assignment errors in man. Why don't they do it more? Also, who would you put on Kelsey?
Well, so I'll answer that second question first. Ideally, Jaron Kearse, who has not received a suspension from the NFL as far as I know, but
yet. I
doubt. What was that?
Yet.
Yeah, right. He almost certainly will. But I doubt the Vikings want to play him. If they do, I'd say, Jaron Kearse, fine. He's 6'5", he's got coverage skills, he's improved pretty significantly, especially coming out of the slot. Without him, you're tempted to say from like a height, weight, speed perspective, Anthony Barr, but in man coverage, he hasn't shown as much capability downfield as he did early in his career. He is primarily covering short zones for a reason for the Vikings. So you end up either having a matchup problem with Eric Kendricks, who's, shorter for a linebacker, or you end up having, a speed problem with like, maybe someone like Ben Gideon. It's a difficulty, but I would probably bite the bullet and say Anthony Barr, who's had some troubles covering tight ends in the past. I think they'd be more pronounced if he wasn't so lucky kind of earlier in the season in terms of drops on those tight ends. But Yeah, I would probably say Anthony Barr if Jaron Kearse isn't playing. Otherwise, the classic matchup would be a safety of some sort. Harrison Smith's not great in man coverage, so I would go with Anthony Harris, and then he allow Harrison Smith to do stuff like, cause chaos and create pressure and stuff like that.
And the bump and run?
Oh, yeah. So why don't they do it more often? I think actually they have calls in their playbook essentially, or in most of the plays that they call, to do it if the defensive backs feel that the situation warrants it. They in particular would do it if they get safety help over the top. The Vikings have been playing a lot of cover 4 and a lot of cover 3, which means that there's not safeties on top of the cornerbacks. The cornerbacks have to be on top. And so the reason that you don't do bump and run coverage when the cornerback is also responsible for like a deep zone is because the cornerback is responsible for the deep zone. If you get beat, that's it. It's a deep touchdown. So why don't they play cover 2 more often, or why don't they play like cover 6 where you've got, cover 6, maybe shade the safety over the top of the fast receiver, play man coverage underneath or something like that. And I think the reason for that is the defense becomes fairly easy to read. You become more vulnerable to running quarterbacks, which, there's mobile quarterbacks, they come more and more often in the NFL. And the Vikings already decide that in their zones they're going to ask their cornerbacks to play man coverage essentially anyway in the pattern match. And so the ideal kind of man coverage version of that for them, I think, involves preventing things like rubs and picks, which we see a lot in especially in the Andy Reid and Shanahan style offenses, which again, we're seeing more often. We see it a lot with the Packers. We see it a lot with the Bears. If they play man coverage, they're more likely to get beat out of that. Plus, we've seen a couple more bunch formation looks out of the NFL, so you just can't be in man coverage against that. But I think that the thesis of the question is fundamentally correct, that maybe there should just be more man coverage and be kind of comfortable with a little bit more cover 2 on top. I know that there was like this big thing a couple years ago about how cover 2 in Tampa 2 is dead and we should stop doing it. But I think just like anything else, like cover 3 is dying and stuff like that. You should be comfortable with a variety of coverages, and I think the Vikings are. So maybe that would be kind of a better solution to kind of what's happening with Xavier Rhodes and Trey Waynes this year, is to maybe have them play a little bit more comfortably in man coverage. The other concern, of course, is that now your safeties don't get to do all the interesting stuff that they've been doing to cause so much havoc, right? Which is, if you're playing cover 2, the safeties are just playing up top. You can't defend the run all that well. And so they don't get to kind of attack the line of scrimmage as much as they should. But I'm okay with that.
Ryan says, while the Chiefs seem to have a marginal defense, their pass rush has been solid, over under 2.5 sacks given up by the O-line.
I'll say, given that it seems like Chris Jones is coming back per the conversation we just had with Seth, I would probably take the over. The Vikings have been pretty good at sack avoidance the past couple of games. But I don't trust it, I guess. We'll see, because, Elfline has had 1 or 2 good games. Now Bradbury has played 3 pretty good games in a row. And Josh Klein is back. And although he, I think, is coming off a poor game, he has generally played pretty well for the Vikings. So, despite that, Chris Jones is a bit of a monster. And the fact that he's been injured is one reason that I think we just haven't talked about him that much coming into this matchup, because he deserves to be talked about as one of the top 5 defensive tackles in the NFL. And without an adequate response to that, I think that there's going to be a lot more pressure than the Vikings are used to.
Does kind of feel like the Vikings are due for like a 3 or a 4 sack game.
Yeah.
Next question is the Viking strategy similar to the Philadelphia game to pick on their poor coverage to mitigate the rush?
Yeah, I think so. It kind of depends on kind of what they do with Tyrann Mathieu, right? Because if he is playing in the nickel a lot, then it's going to be a little bit more difficult to mitigate the rush with quick passes. But I think for the most part, yeah, I think that you use the coverage problems and the injuries that they have at the back end really to mitigate how quick that rush might come. So, the safeties are playing well, obviously. We just heard Seth talk about that. They're number 4 in DVOA, apparently, against the pass, which, again, that surprised me. So they've got responses that you wouldn't have expected, even though they're 24th in points per drive allowed. So maybe the better answer is to have Dalvin Cook go off. And that doesn't necessarily mean run. Like, obviously, Seth mentioned that he's pretty scared that Dalvin Cook will go off for anywhere between 160 to 4,000 yards. But, which, I mean, if you can get a running game, get 4,000 yards, why not?
Yeah, but at that point, Kirk Cousins would be happy to throw the ball 8 times.
Yeah, right. But, using Dalvin Cook in the screen game to mitigate the rush, and that might be the response, is to have Dalvin Cook kind of go off, because the troubles that they have at linebacker might be more important than the troubles that they have in cornerback. Or if you've got the running back going to the outside and attacking those cornerbacks, again, Tyrann Mathieu aside, that might be a better solution. So it really kind of depends on A, who's healthy, B, if, the coverage principles are there to take advantage of. Like if you've got the corner shot against cover 2, or if you've got, the screen passes to mitigate the blitz. Again, they're a very blitz heavy team. And they were particularly blitz heavy the past 2 weeks. Then those screens to Dalvin Cook might be better. So you could say, take advantage of the coverage, to make sure the pass rush doesn't get home. But you could also just say, just take advantage of the fact that they're going to be vacating zones too. So it's not necessarily the same as the Philadelphia game.
Nathan asks, how long do you think it will take Holton Hill to get up to speed on this defense and start contributing on a regular basis?
I wouldn't be surprised if he was active. So he can't practice with the team or anything like that, but I mean, he knows the defense and he's in contact with players on the team. I don't think he's allowed to have contact with the coaches, but he's allowed to have contact with the players. And I'm confident that, he's up to speed and physically capable. He doesn't have any conditioning issues from his time off. So time off, didn't get the day off or anything. But I wouldn't be surprised if he was active. I would say it probably wouldn't take any time. The only reason he'd be inactive is now the Vikings finally have the depth that everyone was talking about before the season started.
Yeah. Matt Freeze asks, if Trubisky and Wentz ever start playing well, will Arif switch to the Ben Baldwin strategy of taking credit for their turnaround, thus cementing his status as a member of Seahawks Twitter?
Not a member of Seahawks Twitter. And taking credit for encouraging a player to get better is not a Seahawks move. It was clearly, I already took credit for Trubisky throwing left last year better. So, it's not, I wouldn't even call it the Ben Baldwin strategy. It's a normal strategy that people use to demonstrate how good they are to the world
at writing, in order to get, being a good writer and getting in their headspace for free. And then, yeah.
Well,
I really want.
I agree that this demonstrates my skill as a writer, but also importantly, my charitable and generous nature.
Oh, that is something that is underrated, really. And let's face it,
people don't talk enough about that.
Let's just face it, your incredible amount of humility. That is.
Yeah, this is why I don't bring it up all that often. It's because I'm so incredibly humble about how morally upstanding I am.
Unparalleled. Next question is from JPC, who asks, if Cousins continues to play or if his play continues to be the same the next games, will we see a potential contract extension in an attempt to lower the cap for next year?
So the only way you can do that is, for context, Cousins won the NFC Offensive Player of the Month. He had the second highest passer rating in a single month in NFL history, second only to Peyton Manning, who had 138. He was at 137.1. So if he continues doing that, I think we see a contract extension in order to extend him, not to lower his cap hit. But the only way that works is if you use and I addressed this actually in the Athletic mailbag, but the way that would work is that you would use a signing bonus to give him cash up front and prorate the hit in accounting terms over the next couple of years. But the reason that that's effective is that it reduces the base salary in the first year, and then you can actually reduce the base salary over the next couple of years. The problem is this really mostly works when you're converting unguaranteed money into guaranteed money, because if a player's contract is fully guaranteed, you cannot reduce the amount of money over the life of that contract, I think. Even if not, if Cousins is playing that well, his agent knows what his market is and knows that if he is in line for an extension of any kind, or if he can argue that, he deserves to be paid more, which he would be if he continues throwing at 135 plus passer rating, which, is not a great stat, but I mean, it's hard to find a guy throwing 135 passer rating and playing poorly over an extended period of time. Then his agent knows that he's worth more than he's getting paid right now. Like, if he's a 130 quarterback, he's worth more than $28 million a year. So you'd have to pay him more average, and there's not really a way you can workshop a signing bonus because you can only prorate it out 5 years anyway. That would end up costing less. Like, the reason the Vikings don't have a weird structure with this current contract is because it's fully guaranteed either way. So it's like it's 27.5 1 year, 28.5 another year, 27 another. Like, it's not an interesting contract structure, and fully guaranteed contracts just don't get that. And I think he would get much of his contract guaranteed in that scenario. So functionally, no.
Our good friend Dusty decided to jump onto Twitter today and ask the question: who is more deserving of NFC Offensive Player of the Month than old Kurt Dirt?
I didn't actually think about this because I don't really care about NFC Offensive Player of the Month. I don't know. George Kittle? I don't know. I just saw him, so that's like clearly.
I mean, an argument could be made for the lead rusher in the league, Dalvin Cook.
Good old Dalvin.
Dalvin.
You could say that. I think Michael Thomas also probably had a pretty great month, especially with a backup quarterback thrown to him. I forget his name. Cooper Kupp had a pretty great month. I also just happen to be naming the two guys that I think are currently leading the league in receiving. So good job, Arif. But those two.
Hard-hitting analysis.
Yeah. Gardner Minshew would be funny. No, he's AFC. Yep. Well, that would make it even funnier, wouldn't it?
That mustache screams NFC.
Yeah. Amari Cooper, maybe. I don't know. Kurt had a pretty good month.
We can give that to him. It's funny. There's a thing out there that said that Matt Stafford has only won that award once in the entirety of the time that he has been in Detroit.
Wow, 40 years. That's incredible.
That is impressive, actually. Only once in 40 years.
And he's still only 25.
He's the oldest 25, yeah. Raul asks, the Vikings have not drafted a quarterback in any round since Teddy in 2014. If Kirk continues to play well and there is no desire to replace him, how should the Vikings approach quarterback in the draft moving forward? Should Spielman be criticized for not taking more swings at the position?
Second question first, yes. So I defend Spielman a lot, but I do think that you should take a quarterback like every other year. If you hit, you get to do what New England does and just trade them away for a song. If you don't hit, oh well. I mean, you got a backup quarterback. I know the Vikings always have a developmental quarterback and a veteran quarterback, but I just really think the return on investment for a quarterback, even in the mid rounds, is pretty good. I mean, like Sean Mannion, he went in the second round, didn't he? So he doesn't really count. But even a Trevor Siemian is pretty valuable to have as a backup. So. Especially if all you paid was a 7th round pick and not like $4 million or whatever. So I think so. I think it's a better strategy than trying to develop these undrafteds, which I do think they've done a better job of than most people. I think Taylor Heineke was a great undrafted signing until the door thing. I think that. Jake Browning, I think they're kind of happy with that. I mean, like, you're screwed if he's in a game, but he's better than most undrafted free agent quarterbacks. So, yeah, but I would just say it is just much better to try and gamble and see if you can get a Dak Prescott or a Russell Wilson or whatever. Or maybe you just end up with a Sean Mannion, or most likely you end up with like a Ryan Mallett or a Zach Mettenberger and they wash out. But for the most part, you're likely going to get. I shouldn't say likely. For the most part, if you keep on drafting quarterbacks in the middle rounds, especially if you end up with like 11 picks every year, I think you're in a better spot in the long term because you can trade them for more valuable pieces, trade down in the draft, use one of the pieces you picked up in the trade down, draft that quarterback again, and keep that cycle going. Because I think the return has generally proven to be more than the cost. And so that might be an inefficiency the league has. Now, back to the first part of the question, how should the Vikings approach this position if Kirk continues to play well? I think they should draft a quarterback in the mid-rounds. I think that would not signal a threat to Cousins, who himself was a mid-round quarterback pick to back up Robert Griffin. Turned out pretty well, I think, even though they didn't want to give him, a full contract. He clearly outplayed his pick slot like a lot of mid-round quarterbacks seem to do these days. So, yeah, I don't think it signals like a lack of faith in Kirk, which is clearly very important to him. He talked about it when he first signed with Minnesota. I think it signals the desire to continue developing talent. So, yeah, if they like him, they would extend him. And that would also resolve this lack of faith thing that sometimes comes up. And then draft a quarterback in round 3 or 4.
Aaron Flasher asks, I have a question for this week's mailbag. Have you seen the movie The Joker? Thoughts? Also, if Kirk Cousins scores a touchdown on the run and then breaks into the Joaquin Phoenix dance from the movie, do you think he is A, referencing the movie, B, just a horrible dancer and the similarity is just a coincidence, or C, in the midst of a psychotic break from reality that we're ignoring because of his recent success? Note that this could explain the I play better when I'm ticked off comments.
So I haven't seen the movie yet, so James will comment on the movie because he's seen it. Mm-hmm. But I have seen that dance, and if he breaks out into that dance, I think it will be indistinguishable from Elaine's Seinfeld dance. So
just thumbs everywhere.
Yeah.
I did see Joker. I did see that this weekend. That was a highly unapologetic movie, I think is the best way that I could describe it. They went in a few directions and they weren't going to apologize for the way that they did it. It kind of forced you to be in a position where not necessarily that you were sympathizing with him, but he was very much the protagonist, and you were kind of forced to see the world through his eyes. It was very reminiscent of Taxi Driver, which many of the reviews have kind of put out as kind of like the way the character was kind of having his breakdown. The movie is completely saved by Joaquin Phoenix's acting. There are a couple of great scenes in there that I will not spoil for Arif because he hasn't seen it yet. And I'm doing a spoiler-free review for the show here. But there's a couple of scenes there that are really, really, really good, where you sit there and go, oh, that totally explains why that happened. Like, I was confused as to why scene A happened the way it did, because it didn't make any sense. Scene B, later, totally, okay, yep, I get it. It wasn't a great movie. It wasn't bad. It was worth every penny that I paid for it, and I think that's the kind of the review of it. It was not a bad movie. It was good. It stuck with you for a little bit. Like, I was thinking about it a little bit on the drive home on Sunday night. But yeah, it's worth seeing. It's not a movie that you're going to regret seeing. And one of the scenes at the end, you just sit there and go, really? Again? I almost feel bad for the kid. But yeah, it's not bad. I enjoyed it, and I look forward to discussing that last thing with Arif when he finally sees it. But not bad. The next question is from a guy by the name of Supercast. He says, Jordan here, hardcore Vikings fan residing in Kansas and will be at the game this Sunday. Do we truly know that Arif Hassan has emotions?
If one can simulate emotions well enough that other people can't tell, well, what's the difference?
Is this the whole like electric sheep thing? Like,
sure. It could also be like, what's that one movie with the guy who plays Poe Dameron in it?
You're thinking of Nic Cage.
No, what?
Wait, Poe Dameron? No, that's... Wow.
You're
I was
thinking of Nic
thinking-
Cage. You know, the guy who plays Poe Dameron. Ah, yes, Nic Cage.
No, because I was thinking of Cameron Poe from Con Air, because that's where my brain went. Wow, I am.
That's incredible.
You
No, okay,
went Star
that's
Wars. I went one of the worst movies.
best movies. You went one of the best movies of all time.
Like when they wrote that message on the body, like in Con Air. You ever see that?
I was thinking of Ex Machina, and the actor was Oscar Isaac. Or like any million other movies where
The person is just not
the
quite
android
all the way
develops
there.
emotions, and the debate about whether or not the android actually has emotions or whatever.
I have witnessed you upset in person, so I can vouch for that. Arif actually does have emotions, even if it's just anger and occasional loopiness from being overly tired or on a pain pill. seems reasonable. Eddie asks, will Arif be eating barbecue while in Kansas City?
Are you kidding me? Of course. What?
Will it be at
Yes.
Oklahoma Joe's or Q39, or what will he be ordering? Ribs, brisket, burned hens, or all of the above? I imagine you just going to the guy and just say, give me one of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've actually been to Oklahoma just before, which now I think is just called Joe's, which sucks. Although like I'm not even close to there. So I don't really have much of I can't really have too much of a say, but I've eaten there before. I had the burnt ends. They were some of the best things I've ever had in my life. Although new entrant into the top 10 is the short ribs I cooked the other day. I'm still crazy about them, but the burnt ends at Joe's, I can't just call it Joe's, Oklahoma Joe's, were incredible. I'm going to do that again. And then from there, Tom Schreier over at Zone Coverage, I'm going to be hanging out with him. I mentioned that I was going to hang out with Seth. Actually, Seth and I and Tom and Seth's wife, and I guess Luke and Luke's wife, are all going to go to Joe's. But that's the day that we arrive. After that, Tom knows somebody who works, I think, at a barbecue place, so we're going to go there. Yeah, it's a barbecue city. We're definitely eating barbecue.
That'd be like asking if you and I are going to be eating seafood in Seattle.
Yeah, come on.
Like, I imagine there will be at least 5 courses. At least
Reef,
5
will you
meals.
have coffee when you're in Seattle? They're known for it. No, I will not have coffee there.
We're just gonna go and throw a brick through a Starbucks, like neoliberals do in Seattle. It's fine. Kyle Slaby asks, you see a mysterious RV parked around the street corner. Trick-or-treaters start walking up to the ramshackle vehicle and leave wearing OSU hats. Worried, you go to phone the police, but the phone lines are cut. I just envision at this point, it's just like the charger cords are cut. You glance outside and see a Sloter jersey is hanging in the window. Fearing the end is nigh, you resort to DMing one person in the hopes that they can help. Who is that person?
Who can stop Don from Ohio?
In my mind, the only person that I would possibly DM is actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf.
I was going to say Kyle Segal, because it takes that kind of crazy, I think, to take on Don.
You need crazy to take on crazy. I could see that.
Yeah.
And we
it's kind of like in Mega Shark versus whatever. Let them fight.
Exactly. Although I don't want to praise him too much because apparently he doesn't listen to the show, according to the messages from Twitter.
Yeah,
so.
geez. The fact that he was surprised to find out that you can make your own homemade candy corn is strong evidence that he has not listened to the show in years.
Speaking of which, Kyle Segal asks, bag of candy corn, bag of circus peanuts, gun to your pet's head, choose.
Well, if I can make the candy corn, obviously the candy corn. Otherwise, yeah, actually, despite my rant about store-bought candy corn the other day, probably the candy corn, because, circus peanuts, good Lord.
If I have a handful of candy corn, like it just there's something about the aftertaste, like the attempt at vanilla that just kind of sticks in my mouth. It's gross. I could handle circus peanuts. I still think for that donation of like $50, I will force Arif to eat gelatin made out of circus peanuts. That
or the circus peanuts gelatin, right? The gelatin
Yes.
that constitutes the circus peanut.
Yeah, it was interesting looking, to say the least. Somebody said they got heartburn just looking at that picture. Woof.
Yeah. It's like the pink slime pictures, but like pink slime, there's like they're like, well, they do pump that full of ammonia, so at least there's nothing pathogenic in it. Like that's something, right? Ammonia's not good for you, but that's something. The gelatin from the circus peanuts is just like, that's pink. That's all I know.
Yeah. Like, I cannot imagine the texture. Like, can I just get a mattress of that and just kind of see what happens? Kind of want to try that.
Best sleep I've ever had.
Yeah, exactly. Honey, why did you come home with a new mattress? What's that smell? It's circus peanuts. You know, the stuff that you push and it goes back up. We're sleeping on that tonight. Or, you know, I am, and you're sleeping in the hotel because I'm an idiot. Don from Ohio asks, over under 200 yards total for Delvin Cook on Sunday.
Yeah, based on what Seth said, over.
Also, what would be the most inappropriate costume to be in while handing out candy to kids? I'm going to make this a football-centric question and not like Jared from Subway or something.
Right. Okay. Well, you already answered it in terms of the non-football one. So good job avoiding the answer by answering.
That is me. That is me to a T.
So if it's football, obviously it's Adrian Peterson, especially in Minnesota. I can't think of anyone else, honestly.
I mean,
actually, Lawrence Taylor.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. The one that I would think of would be wearing a Darren Sharper jersey, and really just wearing a Darren Sharper jersey in general should get you in like not in jail, but get you in trouble.
Yeah, well, I mean, ever so often we still see people with Darren Sharper jerseys. So.
Well, we've mentioned on the before, we saw the kid walking around at the game with a Darren Sharper jersey. Can somebody do something about that? Also, what is one of the most underrated horror flicks of all time?
I don't really like watch horror flicks. I'm like really bad at them. So,
are you bad at them because you don't enjoy horror, or are you just bad at them because you look at them through like, you know, like through like parsed fingertips, like it's opening slightly?
It's like most horror uses like body horror in particular, and that like freaks me out. Ghost stuff doesn't really bother me that much. So there's not a ton of genres of horror that really get me. People like It Follows, so it probably can't be placed on this list because it's not underrated. Babadook, I guess, is pretty good. I can't think of it. We just watched, because it's Halloween, we just watched a horror movie, and everyone really liked it, and we watched it and we were like, whatever. At one point, I forget the name, it was pretty recent, but near the end, like a ghost possesses a handgun, and we were just like done. Like, that's absurd. Come on.
Like we crossed the line. We're out.
Ooh, you've possessed a weapon? The guns are just already scary. Like, what if a ghost's wield it? Like, oh no.
Yeah. Like I'm not a big horror guy. Like my favorite horror movie is still 28 Days Later, which
that's
is
not a horror. Which,
yeah.
I mean, it's an incredible movie, but I would say it's not a horror.
Yeah, that as close as to horror as that is, I suppose.
Probably 28 Weeks Later is closer to a horror because there's so much tension in the first half of that movie.
Yeah, I think you're right there. But that, you know, that's the sort of thing that I like, and I I openly despise zombie movies, not because I think they're scary, just because I'm tired of zombie stuff, whether it be Walking Dead or stuff like that. Like I can't, I'm out. Can't do it. The X watched too many of them. I'm so 100% totally out.
That's fair. I had a huge zombie phase. I'm still super into them, but like I kind of agree that there's not a ton of zombie media that does new, interesting, or good stuff. Like even the stuff that was like really well produced, like The Walking Dead. I could probably rewatch the first couple of seasons of that, but then after that, it's just like, yeah, whatever.
Well, I mean, I might be able to watch it. I might be able to watch seasons of The Walking Dead where the grass isn't, you know, cut. I think I could, I could handle that. I love telling that.
And I'll still read World War Z. That book is amazing.
That is a good book. That is a good book. But so I'm actually less about movies than I am about TV shows. And a couple of years ago, must have been when the kid was first born, I was on Netflix and I found the old Alfred Hitchcock TV show that used to be on Nick at Night years ago at like 9 o'clock. So I'd be able to watch it like right before bed. And they, well, you knew my parents. Of all great, football podcast material here. But there was it was from the 40s and 50s. This program that was in black and white that was Alfred Hitchcock Presents. It's the famous like him walking into like a silhouette that has him in the picture. Right. And there's an episode of that show that just it bothers me so bad. Because it's almost like a worst fear sort of situation. The episode involves this great actor who was in Citizen Kane as the best friend, the one that had his review written for him in Citizen Kane, and he is he's driving along and he gets into this terrible car wreck. And is in a coma, like a waking coma, like his eyes are open, and it runs through his thoughts as he's seeing this whole day happen in front of him, and he can't give any sort of like a move or can't say anything to anybody who comes by and sees his car. And they like take his stuff and they like take his clothes, and he's just sitting there all day. Just, why won't anyone look at me or like see if I'm alive? Everyone just assumes I'm dead. And they take him somebody finally like picks him up, and it's this great 20-30 minute episode that I highly recommend. I know the show is on Hulu now, but it's so good. But like that sort of thing, like truly relatable horror. Like, oh, I'm a vegetable now. Like, oh, okay. Well, that's rough.
Like that's a thing that could happen. I can imagine that. Yeah.
Like that sort of thing is something I actually enjoy / am terrified of. So, and I actually just rewatched that the other day.
Speaking on stuff that was on Nickelodeon, Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Oh yeah, some of the stuff from the first season or two of that was really entertaining.
Yeah,
it was really good. Kenneth Allen asks, what is a reasonable price to go to a game? I live close enough to go to this game, but I'm also not rich like Mr. Homeowner Hassan.
Jesus.
From Kenneth Allen.
So rich. Like $120, right? It's only 16 games a year.
I think, I think that if it's if it's the one game that you're going to go a year, I feel like somewhere between 120 and 140 is okay. Kind of depending on the market and depending on the day that the game happens, because Monday night games end up being more. Thursday night games end up being more because they are special. I was kind of upset that the tickets for the Jets game were so much cheaper than the tickets to the Seattle game. As it turns out, A, the teams that are playing are both really good right now, and B, apparently Monday night in Seattle is a much more expensive ticket than Sunday afternoon in New York. So, or New Jersey. So like we both corrected that. But I feel like 120-ish should be fine. I remember the good old days at the Dome when you could get into one of the top level corners, like right near the ceiling, for like $40 at the Metrodome.
Yeah, I remember I scalped an obstructed view ticket for $20, and I just didn't sit in my assigned seat because it's an obstructed view. But how weird is it that was like a thing that you just had to be aware of, that there were obstructed view seats? Like that's insane. Like people would design stadiums like that.
It's so dumb, and they're still, if for certain events, they just plan that out depending on how they end up having stuff out on the floor. But yeah, it's so dumb. But I remember going to nearly all the games of the 2009 season simply because if you went up in that corner and went on like StubHub or whatever, you were paying $30, $40 maybe to go up there and just watch the game. It was just such a fun thing. Also, can you shout out a couple of your all-time favorite Deadspin articles? Since Deadspin, if in case you have been living under a rock, Deadspin, a fantastic sports blog, amongst other things when they were not sticking to sports, is in the process of dying it's dying of 1,000 paper cuts right now. Everybody's leaving. So our favorite all-time Deadspin pieces. I'm going to start off with the research done by their team on the girlfriend and the death of the girlfriend of Monday Teo.
Yeah, incredible that they were able to do all this investigative journalism on just such a profoundly insane story. Like, who would have thought that Manti Te'o's girlfriend didn't exist?
Exactly. Like, it was so good.
Like, how do you get to... That's crazy.
I followed Notre Dame, and that was like, I thought I knew everything that was going on, and I did not.
Right, yeah. You wouldn't have expected it. Like surely if they were going to honor his dead girlfriend right before a game, that she must have existed.
Exactly. Like, somebody had to look that up. Hey,
right,
do you have a picture of the two of you? No.
Right. Where's the funeral? Do you have details? It's just like normal stuff.
Oh.
So obviously that's incredible. The Drew Magary stuff, the Jamboree, the mailbag, your team sucks.
Oh.
Incredible. My favorite Drew Magary is the Hater's Guide to the Williams-Sonoma catalog.
Every year.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's just phenomenal.
Yep. Every year when that would come out, a friend of mine and I make sure to send that to the other person. Like, oh, I'm reading it. We have to do this together. We have to go through this together. And I was talking to you before the show. We talked about the chili recipe from Drew Magary, which was one of the things that got me kind of into him. The chili recipe, by the way, that includes ashes from 2 joints and corn. And I don't know which one is a weirder thing to include in a chili.
Right.
But they required both of them, and I was like, why would you put corn in there? I'm fine with the ashes of a joint, but why would you put corn in there?
Why would you put corn? Yeah. And speaking of McGarry, the night the lights went out, when he talks about him going into a coma.
Yes.
Really incredible story. But also speaking about food, the whole food spin thing that Albert Bernayko did about how to just become a better cook and not kind of bachelor your way through it.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good. I watched a ton of Good Eats, and I read a bunch of cooking books, and I like to think that I'm a foodie and stuff like that. And I've got a friend who doesn't cook at all, and we both enjoy those pieces equally because they were accessible, informative, correct. And just really, really good. And we tried some of the recipes and they're phenomenal. So that stuff, going back to sports, because of course the reason Deadspin died is because they wouldn't stick to sports, but their piece about sports writing, those pieces are pretty good. One I remember was Rick Riley before he was Rick Riley, where they list a bunch of the really incredible stuff Rick Riley wrote before he, signed with ESPN in this mega contract at the same time Bill Simmons signed with ESPN in a mega contract, and they fought each other behind the scenes. And before he started mailing in a bunch of his pieces, and
all the stuff they did with Whitlock's Undefeated, as that was just not launching, and they ended up with the full playbook and all of the discussions on how the Undefeated will follow the rise of LeBron as he overtakes the brand of Michael Jordan. Like, all this is written out, and people are like, "I'm sorry, what? What are we doing?"
It would isolate. Like, he would be like, our stance is this. And it's like, what do you mean our stance? That's insane. The whole thing about Whitlock.
You see Whitlock celebrating the death of Deadspin?
Yeah, I saw that. It was just like, all right. The only reason you're celebrating is because they were right. So good for you.
Yeah.
That was just incredible. Obviously, we'll be linking a bunch of these. In the show notes, the expose on the on sports betting, how America's favorite sports betting expert turned a soccer's game into an industry. Just really incredible. It's a great introduction to, and they talk to a bunch of sharps. Great introduction to like the world of sports gambling and just kind of the way it operates.
Their takedown on Daily Fantasy was really remarkable when that was going on. I remember that. I don't have that listed, but that was a really interesting set of articles that they were putting out, just kind of like where all the money is going.
Yeah, really incredible stuff. Chris Cluey's pieces were pretty good. I was an NFL player until I was fired by two cowards and a bigot. Wow. Obviously, that ended up getting litigated. There was pushback. Cluey turns out not to be like a saint, I guess, in a locker room. Whatever, right? Yeah. It's an explosive piece. Cluey does have like kind of a gift for incredibly creative writing. And that I just think it's worth reading. Mm-hmm. And then also he got into a fight with former tight end / freelance sports columnist who had pieces published in the Washington Post and the New York Times, Nate Jackson, who I think played tight end for the Broncos for like 3 years or something like that. But they just got into fights and he would publish the fights like on Deadspin. That was pretty hilarious.
And, as much as I hated seeing it, because I did end up seeing it during the while they were posting this, but the fact that they were the place for the Brett Favre scandal with Jen Sturger, like they were the place. In fact, the scandal had broken like a year or so before it ended up actually becoming a thing, and I believe it was a Deadspin writer who asked Favre in a press conference about it, and then the snowball like really started moving on it.
Yeah, they moved that story forward. That was huge. They documented their own demise, which I think is just really fascinating. And the piece that stands out from that collection, Adults in the Room, where they talk about so an editor at Deadspin writes up like what it's like to be bought by a company that thinks it knows how to run the business better than the business, which is already profitable, does. And at the end of the piece, she quits. Like all of these pieces are great, right? We're recounting our all-time favorite Deadspin pieces, but this is just such a good read.
Yeah, there's tons of great stuff here, and a lot of the people who came from this site that ended up going to Deadspin came from KSK, from Kissing Susie Colbert, which was a fantastic place to read sports rants and news. And I was actually just kind of reminiscing, like, okay, all of these people started at KSK. Like this is nuts. Kissing Susie
McGarry
Colbert
was there. Drop Play Dave was there. Somebody did the Peter King takedowns. Those were phenomenal.
Yeah, I think that that ended up turning into some of the stuff from Awful Announcing. And that was so good. But yeah, it's too bad that all of these people are leaving Deadspin. Actually, it's not bad that they're leaving Deadspin. It appears to be the right call, but it's just too bad that this is something that's happening to what was a fantastic website. And whether you frequented it every day or whether you just followed it on Twitter and just clicked on a link like, that could be interesting, it was good to go to. It was a good way to waste some time, and it was a good way to read. It was also, if you were into boxing, it was one of the best websites to look into like boxing stuff, because they were just like, if you want to write a 10,000 word article on this, you can, and people often did. And it was really, really well done. I was going to say, one of the other things that I didn't get a chance to mention here is the lists of like, because we've referenced this on the show before, remember these guys, or let's remember some guys. And they would just list, like, it was like somebody opening up a pack of cards from the 1998 like Upper Deck thing from baseball. And it's like all of these names, like, oh yeah, I totally remember that guy. Or like Bernard Berrien. Oh yeah, that was a fella. God, there's such a wealth of fantastic material in their archives. It's a darn shame that most of it is, or that the new stuff is likely not going to be as good, because all of these great names are moving on. But that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. We will be back for next episode, for episode 300. Yay! Episode 300. You know what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to post episode 1 with that you and Dusty did, and I'm just going to, like, because I still have it. I'm just going to post that and just see if anybody... Yeah, I'll just see if anybody notices. Me like... Yep, episode 1. I'm just going to post this. Why are you guys complaining about Ponder at training camp?
Why did you spend so long telling me how good of an athlete Joe Webb is? That's like weird.
that seemed out of place. Why would you do such a thing? But we will do something interesting for it, I'm sure. So that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Arif, what do you have to plug?
Couple pieces at The Athletic, obviously recaps and stuff, but also I'll have my piece previewing the Chiefs game with stolen insights from Seth Keysor, although at least this time he also works for The Athletic, so that'll make it easier. And that's about it. It's the only thing I've got coming up.
That's all you got. That's all you really needed for that. All right, so that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Again, thank you guys so much for listening. Please remember that revenge is a dish best served funky as hell. And we will see you next week for episode 300. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and co-host, and my name is James Bagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can also be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.